Hi, welcome to the URM vlog, and in this series of short videos I'll be talking about the changes to the ISO 27001 standard. In this first video I'll be covering at a high level what the key changes are, and in future videos I'll get into more detail around some of the specifics. So what are the key changes? First of all, the title has changed. It's now called Information Security, Cybersecurity and Privacy Protection, Information Security Management Systems, Requirements. One thing to point out here though is that one shouldn't take that to mean that by conforming to the requirements of the standard, one will automatically be compliant with any legislation or regulations associated with privacy and the protection of personal information. With regard to the content of the standard, on the management system side, the clauses 4 through till 10, the structure and the requirements themselves remain largely the same, although there are some changes that we'll cover in future videos. The main change comes around Annex A, which now reflects the new version of ISO 27002, which was published in April in 2022. There are now 93 controls, as opposed to 114 in the 2013 version. But don't let this fool you, because this is largely due to the fact that a number of controls from the old standard have been merged. Essentially, none of the guidance that was important before has been lost, and in fact there are also 11 new controls that have been added. And of course we'll be talking about these new controls and the new guidance associated with the existing controls in future videos. In addition to the mergers and changes, the numbering and structure associated with the controls in Annex A has also been changed. Whereas before the 114 controls were split over 14 domains, covering things like asset management and access control, cryptography, operations security and third-party management, these have now been rearranged into 4 different themes, covering organisational controls, technical controls, physical and environmental controls, and people-based controls. The structure of the information provided against each of the controls has also been changed within ISO 27002, which is the standard that provides guidance on how to implement those controls. Whereas previously each control section had an objective which covered a number of different controls, each control now has its own purpose defined within the standard. There is also a table at the top of every control within 27002 which covers the different attributes that have been identified as being applicable to that control. And as far as attributes are concerned, we'll cover those in a separate video as well. As I said earlier, a number of the different controls within the 2013 version have been brought forward into the 2022 version but have been merged. Here's an example of what I mean by merging these controls. So previously we had 9.1.1 access control and 9.1.2 access to networks and network services as 2 separate controls, whereas now these 2 controls have been merged into a new control 5.15, which simply talks about access control but incorporates all of the guidance from those previous 2 controls as well as any new up-to-date guidance that needed to be added. I've also mentioned that a number of controls have been updated, with significant amounts of guidance being added to some of those controls. An example is on the screen at the moment, where previously there were just a couple of paragraphs associated with segregation of duties, whereas now the structure and layout of all of the information around segregation of duties has changed and a significant amount of guidance has been added. So hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the changes that have taken place with regard to ISO 27001 and of course the supporting standard, the guidance standard ISO 27002, upon which Annex A is based. In future videos we'll be covering some of the detail around some of these changes. Thanks for listening and I'll see you in the next video.